Grief is the process we go through when we lose something or someone we care about. And it's complicated because whether you are experiencing preparatory grief, which is the process you go through when you are losing someone gradually to a progressive and degenerative disease over an extended period of time, or you are trying to cope with your grief after the death of someone you loved has died, you need to be aware this is hard. This is really hard. There is no scale to measure the depth, the intensity, or the pain of a person's grief. And it is not a linear process. There's no timetable. You don't start at point A and reach point B by any certain date. Every person's grief is as unique and as personal as the relationship that they had with the person before the illness or the death. Like most caregivers, Madelyn, my mother, began grieving the loss of her husband years before he died. She had never heard the terms preparatory grief or anticipatory grief, but she most certainly understood what they were. She often said, "My husband died on October 30th, 1993. We just haven't gotten around to burying him yet." She said she thought when someone was seriously ill, it could feel like they had been dead for as long as a person had been taking care of them. Like most caregivers, Madelyn struggled to maintain her own emotional equilibrium while constantly having to adjust to the progression of Quentin's disease and the loss of so many of his qualities and abilities that she had always cherished. She was grieving the loss of his physical capabilities. He had always been so strong. He could do anything, build anything. He could fix anything. And now, as his prostate cancer was advancing and he had had a few more strokes, he would often sit at the kitchen table with his chin on his chest most of the day. Once in a while, he would lift his head and he would look out the window at the hill he used to farm, but he rarely smiled. So she was not only grieving the loss of his physical and cognitive abilities, his diminished common sense and clear thinking, she was also grieving the loss of his optimism, his cheerfulness, and his good humor. And most of all, she was grieving the loss of him and the relationship that they had enjoyed for so many years. She was also grieving the fact that she no longer had any time to herself. She had lost the freedom to come and go as she pleased. She had dropped out of her volunteer organizations and social groups, which meant she wasn't getting to engage in any stimulating conversations or enjoy being with interesting friends. She was grieving the loss of their future plans. They had finally reached a point where they had enough time and enough money to travel. The winter before Quentin's first stroke, they had escaped the bitter cold and wind of the Kansas winter and rented an apartment in Florida close to my mother's sister Jean and her husband Frank. For 10 glorious weeks, they had reveled in the warm weather. My dad played golf with my Uncle Frank 2 or 3 times a week. Mom took a course at the local church, and they went out to eat often with Jean and Frank and their friends. She said it was the happiest, most carefree 10 weeks of their entire life. They had made reservations for the same apartment starting the week after Christmas, and she had started packing for their trip the morning that Quentin had his stroke. And that changed everything. A few years later, she wrote, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but sometimes when I look at your father, I don't see him. Rather, what I see is a repulsive, disgusting old man. When he sits around in his Depends all day long and doesn't even bother to put on pants, when he overloads his spoon and spills half of the food down the front of his shirt, when he doesn't talk or laugh or make any effort to do his exercise so he can get stronger, I get angry and frustrated, and I often feel disgusted with him." Then the other day I brought myself up short and thought, okay, this is not the Quentin I have known and loved for so many years, and I know he is not doing any of these things that irritate or upset me on purpose. He can't help it. So I'm trying to focus on who he was before the stroke. He used to be so careful. He He would never come in the house wearing dirty boots. He never walked across the carpet while wearing his work clothes. He always hung his clothes up in an orderly fashion. His dress clothes were here and his work clothes were there, and they were always buttoned up and facing the same direction. He was well read. He read the Hutchinson News, the High Plains Journal, Successful Farming, and Time magazine from cover to cover every week. He had wonderful table manners, and he was fun to be with. I was always proud to be his wife. I have to remember now who he used to be. And I have to remember that he is still in there. So when I look at him now and my initial response is to be repulsed, I try to conjure an image of who he used to be. It seems to help. That letter still breaks my heart. It was a terrible time for both of them. Madelyn dealt with her preparatory grief by acknowledging her emotions and writing about her struggles in letters to me. I would like to encourage you to follow her example and write about the losses that you have already experienced, as well as the changes, the losses, and the adjustments you expect you will have to deal with as you go forward. Doing that might make it a little easier for you to determine what you can do to get prepared for whatever lies ahead. Caregiving will take you on a hard, bumpy journey, but the good news is that there are organizations and resources and programs that can ease your burden. Nothing will stop your heart from breaking as age and disease robs your loved one of their memories, strengths, and abilities, but there is help available. There are people who understand. You don't have to bear this load alone. So I encourage you to seek help from a counselor, a member of the clergy, join a support group, and reach out to your local area agency on aging to find out what resources are available in your area. And most importantly, know that you won't have to feel this way forever. You will survive, and someday your experiences may help other caregivers cope and manage with the depression and grief they experience while they are facing the challenges of caring for a loved one who will never recover or get better.